So we are back with Horror Movie Month.
Right.
Which I'm thrilled about. That's probably my favorite season. Spooky season? Yeah?
I think it's one of my favorites, honestly, because I love horror movies. You love horror movies.
Yes.
So
everybody knows by now what we're doing because I've got roasted for it on Twitter. But we are doing a compare and contrast of the original Psycho versus the remake. Now, a lot of people were asking us to do Psycho 2, which I didn't even honestly know was a real thing, so I am interested in seeing it now.
There's also a Psycho 3.
Okay, well, I would like to see 2 first. And I've heard that that's actually better than the remake, so people are very disappointed in us. Sorry, but we're good at disappointing people. Anyway.
We've made a professional podcasting career about disappointing our listeners.
Yes, and speaking of disappointing our listeners, to intro this, I thought it would be fun for you to hear a comment that we just got a few weeks back on one of the first horror movies we did on our podcast.
Okay.
Okay, so this is about I Am the Pretty Little Thing That Lives in the House. So do you remember doing this podcast?
I do. It was a terrible movie, and I had a lot of fun ripping it apart.
Yes, and admittedly, we've progressed in our time in doing this podcast. I don't remember when we did this podcast. It must be like 2 years ago now, somewhere around there.
It was one of the first movies we did. It was basically like right after Saving Private Ryan, Manchurian Candidate after our first.
It still has our original logo.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you guys don't know, we are not experts on movies. We just enjoy talking about them. We do more research now than we did before, but we did zero back then.
So. No, we winged it hard.
Yes, and you guys still roast us for our lack of ability to know anything great about films, but this is funny. So anyway, it says, if you're going to review a movie, I would suggest actually watching and listening. They discuss that the home was built by her husband as a wedding gift. They also discuss that both Polly and her husband were never seen again. So, maybe the murderer was not her husband at all. She looked worried when she saw him, defiantly not the face I would give to someone that I love and trust. Also, the Victorians were fascinated with death. They used to have mourning rooms in their home. After someone would die, they would lay on a display in a room so the family could grieve, and also when a spirit awoke, they would be in a familiar place. Death was looked at quite differently than it is today. People didn't live very long, and the average life expectancy was between 35 and 50. They were surrounded by death. Rewatch the movie with an open mind and think on it before you mindlessly move your mouth. I would for once respect anyone that could give a meaningful review without all this BS. The movie was made specifically to be symbolic. Just like there were so many aspects to the story that we felt left with no closure, almost like when you die unexpectedly, you really have no closure and have more questions than answers.
You're wrong, and just because you think a movie has more meaning doesn't mean that it has more meaning, so shut up.
Yeah, so I will just say that I don't remember exactly what we talked about in that podcast because it was so long ago. I do remember I didn't really like the movie. I found it very slow, and I just didn't get into it very well.
It was not a good movie, and it was the only redeeming part of that whole experience for me is that I was right for one of the rare occurrences in our relationship because of calling the police when you see a passed out body.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And you would have just left the person to die on the floor because you're horrible.
Let's not dredge up old things.
But other than that, other than me being right for a change, it was a terrible movie.
Yeah. Now, will I say that we may have missed symbolism? Now, this is possible. Now, I do normally pick up symbols and things like that because I enjoy that. I love picking it apart. But in this movie, I was very bored. So when I get bored, I tend to not pay as much attention as I should. So it's possible.
You tend to start paying more attention to your phone.
Yes, I do. Although I don't know that I did that in this. But either way,
I think you did.
It's possible. But either way, so I'm just here to say that these are funny to us, but at the same time, it makes me look back and be like, wow, we have grown so much. Like, and also, good for us.
Bad movies are just bad movies. There's no deeper context there. It's just, it's garbage. Like, you have to stop analyzing. You can't always turn something into Citizen Kane. It's just a bad movie. Let it go.
Yes.
People are allowed to make bad movies. And why do you have to feel so personally attacked that we shit on a movie?
Yeah. So, anyways, all of that to say that it's interesting that people are still listening to our old podcast and crapping on us for it. It's like it's a gift that keeps on giving. You know what I'm saying? It just is. So, anyways, if you guys are here to listen to a artful and expertly known analysis of the 2 Psycho movies, you're in the wrong podcast. You might want to leave because that's not what we're doing here. We are enjoying movies and we like to kind of go through and...
Also, how did you get here? We've never represented it as that. You've clearly missed...
You've taken a wrong turn.
Yeah.
So anyway, we will be giving trivia pieces. There is a history minute where we do actually research some things that are interesting. And we do, as much as we can, try to find out what we can. But we've researched this right before the podcast, so it's not like an expert opinion or anything like that. So, yeah, here we are.
Getting back to the topic at hand, I'm Tyler.
I'm Shay.
And this is Cinematically Correct. And this week we are doing a double header. We're doing the original and the remake of Psycho.
Yes, we are.
So...
Do you want to start with your beer?
We're going to start with the beer. I'm actually kind of disappointed with the beer scene in our local area. I would have expected in October that there would have been a better choice.
Like Bates Motel
Or Psycho Brew or something.
Yeah, something horror related.
Or Mother. Mother's got, just, I don't know. But I have Night Shift Brewing, which is fine and applicable, I guess, because it's a night shift at the motel. And it's Night Crew, an American strong ale. And
tell us why you picked it, because they can't see the can.
So it's got the title is on is a full moon with the neon lettering of a old timey motel. So yeah, I picked it mostly for the artwork on the can, which you admittedly can't see, but there wasn't a whole lot of good choices, and I feel that I'm not going to particularly care for this because it's a strong ale. Also, I'm doing a bit of day drinking again, which...
Oh, please. It's a weekend.
That was a good crack.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not bad at all.
Oh.
I mean, it's definitely got a nice, strong flavor to it, but it doesn't have that overly hopped IPA Christmas tree taste.
Oh.
I'll give that a 3.5.
For that, that's pretty good.
It's not bad. It's not something you could drink a whole lot of them. It's not something you're going to be pounding watching a football game, but it's fine.
Okay.
All right,
so let's get into this because this is going to be a long podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so brief synopsis. I mean, for those of you who have lived under a rock and don't know what it's about.
Brief synopsis.
The movie is about a woman who steals money, leaves to go see her lover, and is brutally murdered by Norman Bates' mother.
Okay, so we're going for the Hitchcockian brief synopsis. Got it.
That's what happens.
Yes, it is.
All right, it's been around forever. It's probably the most referenced movie of all time. If you don't know what happens in this movie, that's on you. Like, you could not have seen this movie and you already know the ending.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so let's talk about the cast. I mean, obviously, the 1960 cast, we are not going to know where they're from or any of that kind of stuff because I haven't seen a lot of 1960 movies. I don't know if you have, but...
Not particularly.
Okay, so Anthony Perkins, he became so typecasted at Norman Bates and he wouldn't even do interviews after this because he didn't want to talk about Psycho anymore. But he plays Norman Bates. I don't know what to say. He plays a very good psychotic person.
I mean, he's probably the iconic or most iconic villain that I can think of where you actually see their face. Like, a lot of villains you don't see the person.
Mm-hmm.
He's up there. He's arguably ahead of Hannibal Lecter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just the Mount Rushmore of creepy. It just... What more can you say?
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking through his IMDb right now, and it looks like he continued only to do pretty much horror movies. So, in The Deep Woods, which is a 1992, which was his last movie. I don't know if The Naked Target is horror, but Target. A Demon in My View. He did all of the Psycho...
Sequels,
it
2 and 3.
seems. Edge of Sanity, Destroyer. Yeah, so he was clearly a horror movie actor. So, nothing to complain about there. He was amazing. Then there's Vera Miles, who plays Lyla Crane, which is funny that she's further up than Janet Leigh, but hey, maybe she was more popular?
She was much more well-known, and she felt slighted that this is the role that she got because she wasn't able to do another Alfred Hitchcock movie, and he kind of was basically taking her down a peg. So she'd been in a lot of things. I mean, she's in a
Now, she is still alive today. She is one of the few actors who are still alive today. So that's pretty amazing, considering this came out in 1960, and she had to have been in her 20s or 30s.
Right. So, I mean, she was fine in this, and there's no complaining. She had to wear a wig for that because she had shaved her head for a previous movie.
Yeah, and she may have actually had more screen time than Janet Leigh did, because, there was...
Probably.
Yeah, but Janet Leigh's just more...
iconic for that one scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that scene makes this entire movie.
Right.
So...
Yeah. Okay, and then there's John Gavin, who plays Sam Loomis. I'll be completely honest, I have nothing to say about that. I know that he does provide the inspiration for the detective. I think it's the detective. No, the doctor.
Dr. Sam Loomis in Halloween.
Yeah, so I know that, but I mean, even Hitchcock said he was stiff, so
I mean, he was stiff, but also he is important because he's the one that stops the last murder when she's in the basement seeing Mother. So,
right.
He is integral to the plot of this movie.
Right. But it looks like he stopped acting in the 80s. He did live until, I think, 2018.
Yes.
Yeah, 2018. But yeah, I mean, I don't know him from anything because I didn't really watch a lot of movies prior to the 80s. We're working on it, but I didn't. So, Janet Leigh. So she plays Marion. She is most famous for this movie, I would guess. And she has a famous daughter, which we just found this out because we're slow. And
she is. So her daughter is Jamie Lee Curtis, and that's, in fact, why Jamie Lee Curtis was cast for Halloween.
And why she's basically the scream queen of our days.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Janet Leigh did, not a cameo, but like a appearance in Halloween H2O, where she drove a car similar to the car in Psycho. So that's kind of cool.
So she's also in The Fog with her daughter, which is another horror movie.
But she plays kind of like a working woman, but still...
She's a secretary that's been working the same job for a while, doesn't make a whole lot of money.
Right, and wants to kind of run away with the guy that she's having an affair with.
Well, I don't know if it's an affair. They're just...
Well, he's married.
He's divorced. He's paying alimony. So they're both technically available, but they're not married, which makes it in 1960s taboo to...
I interpreted that scene as he was going to get a divorce and it would cost him money to pay alimony. That's why he didn't want to run away with her. I didn't realize that he had already been divorced.
Do you want to sign my wife's alimony checks? Or my ex-wife's alimony checks?
But I was thinking of that as a future tense. If I do this, then I will have to pay alimony kind of thing.
And then there's the only other real character in this is Martin Balsam.
And we've done a movie with him.
Yes.
Wow.
12 Angry Men, which is one of my all-time favorites.
So
because
proud
it's
of us.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean,
he's fine. There's nothing wrong with the detective in the movie, but it's just there's
nothing wrong with it, but also like I didn't find it. That was a part of the movie that I was kind of like, okay, But Hitchcock said, this is because all of you people ask, why don't they call the cops? Well, this is why they don't call the cops, because it's dull.
Yeah, I mean, what more can you say?
Right. So, anyways, moving on to the 1998 cast. If you don't know, Vince Vaughn plays Norman Bates. Now, we will talk about how we feel about who played what and what it was better and which one. But he plays a more openly creepy, I would say, version of Bates, where the other version felt like it was more trying to trick you into thinking he was a nice guy and be sympathetic.
Lull you into a false sense of security, where this guy is just clearly a little bit off.
Now, which way works better and why, we'll talk about later, but that's what he plays. Now, Vince Vaughn is mostly known for his comedic roles, so I think that is part of the speculation as to why people don't like him. But
I mean, we've done a few movies with Vince Vaughn for the podcast already. Do you know which ones?
We have. The Breakup would be one of them.
Yep. What's the other
one? I would have to scroll through his IMDb to find it, so I don't know. Go ahead, tell me.
Rudy.
Oh, yeah. See, he was so young in that. So
he was very young in Rudy. So,
yeah. But I mean, I love Vince Vaughn. So, I mean, whether or not I love him in this is irrelevant. I just love him as a person. Okay. So
Marion Crane is
Anne Heche.
Yeah.
So she's currently on Dancing with the Stars. So I know some of my friends on here. Probably, I would guess, Ryan Terry, because he's very into showbiz. And probably Krista would be interested in Dancing with the Stars, and she's currently on it. I do think she gets voted off, but I'm a little bit behind, so, whatever. But she explains her story, and I would kind of like to say her story because she was really proud of being able to finally say it on air, but she was dating Ellen DeGeneres and ended up getting kicked off an award show because she brought Ellen DeGeneres as a date, and she was one of the first people to do that. So, good for her for doing that. And I didn't know that about her, and I don't think when this movie came out that was very well known about her. It seemed like this, when she talked about it on Dancing with the Stars, was one of the first times she widely publicized it. Right. So that's awesome. Good for her. So I have to say that. She plays a little bit more aggressive version of Marion Crane, at least to me. More...
I think that's fair. I mean, there was definitely way more guiltiness in her delivery, speaking to the cop, and she was more defensive.
Yeah.
It seemed.
Yeah, so we'll kind of go into that. But Julianne Moore plays Lyla Crane, which I don't know why that surprised me to see her in this, but it just did. It surprised me. Did it surprise you?
I did not see that one coming. I don't have a problem with that.
No, I like her.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the fact that they made the sisters look very different, because sisters can look very different, and having the two look so much alike, I felt like kind of confused me a little bit, where I was like, wait, I am looking at a different person. Got it. Okay, understood.
She didn't actually die. Got it.
So basically, yeah. Julianne Moore is known for a lot of things, but off the top of my head, I am not pulling them up.
Hannibal, Boogie Nights.
Yeah. I know she was also in Don John, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it was a Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie that I wanted to love, but
I don't think I have seen that one, actually.
That's all I'm going to say about that. Then there was Viggo Mortensen, who played Sam Loomis. Again, Sam Loomis really, of a character for me.
However, and everyone knows this is coming, that is my Lord of the Rings reference.
Of course
because
it is.
He is, in fact, one of the actors from Lord of the Rings.
Wow, you really stretched for that one.
I really had to reach for that one. He plays Aragorn in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
All three. So yeah, that's easy. Done.
Okay, that's easy. We'll talk about William H. Macy since we talked about Abergast in the other one. I know him from Shameless because, that's, to me, in our time, is one of his, big roles. He plays a drunk very well.
He signed on to this movie on the director's name alone, Gus Van Sant. He said he would do a adaptation of a phone book if he was directing.
Yes.
He also was willing to risk his own safety to throw himself down a staircase for this movie to do a reimagining of a better version of the death scene, because that is questionable in the original. It just doesn't look quite right. But no, they wanted to do a shot-for-shot remake, so they did it. Mm-hmm. Which I feel that's a missed opportunity to have fixed one of the few holes in the original.
You're going to get roasted for saying fixed. Okay, I'm just going to move right forward. So all I wanted to do was mention my Gilmore Girls reference because you did your Lord of the Rings, so I have to do that. Rita Wilson played Caroline, and she was in The Good Wife with Matt Krzyzewski, however you say his last name, who plays Logan in Gilmore Girls. Thank you, we're done.
All right.
Okay. So, we are 18 minutes in, and we haven't even gotten into it, so
yeah, we got to get going.
All right. So, I want to talk about first encounters with Psycho, because, I feel like this is one of those movies where you just remember where you first saw this, so go.
I remember it like it was yesterday, because I was sitting on that couch.
That's the first time you saw the original Psycho?
Yeah.
Was it the first time?
I've been holding this in for a while. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to get your original reaction.
Okay, guys. Okay, I'm just going to say, you all roasted me because I hinted at the fact that I do like the remake. But you better be roasting him for never having seen even the original. No. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay, so we're going to have first impressions here.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. I'm horrified. I don't even know what to say. Wow. That was,
So, yeah.
Okay, then. I knew that you didn't see a lot of movies that were at all exciting when you were younger because you had a boring childhood of movies. But, oh, my.
I've seen most of the other Hitchcocks, if I'm being honest. It's just this one hadn't made it to the list.
Psycho.
Yeah.
Didn't make the... Guys, please.
It was on the list. I never got around to watching it until now.
Take this away, guys, please. Please. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, okay. So my first encounter, which is why I think I enjoy the remake more than y'all do, is because my first encounter was with the remake, and it was like a televised version. It was super late at night, and I was not allowed to be watching TV that late at night. And I did it with the lights off and watched the movie on the phone with a friend of mine under the covers, and we were terrified. And every little move in the house, we were scared, but I was also scared about getting caught, so it was like a double whammy, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And I didn't know who Vince Vaughn was at the time. I don't know if I hadn't seen his movies or if I just didn't put it together. I don't know, but I didn't know who he was. So I didn't have that, like, you know, thinking of him as comedy man. I had nothing.
Right.
So, and I hadn't seen the original yet, so I had nothing to compare to. It was just, this is creepy, and also it's late at night, and my parents can't know I'm awake, so I'm not saved from any intruders, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, yeah, it was terrifying, and definitely one of those moments you'll never forget. But then I did see the original later on in life, but it was for a film class. And we had to do, like, the comparisons and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit different experience. You know, it doesn't have that fear factor. You're doing it for a film analysis.
It's almost clinical because you're doing it for school. Like, it's homework, and you're just like, ah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So I feel like the settings kind of shifted my opinions of the movies. Now, granted, obviously, the original is by far better.
Yeah, but that's inarguable.
Yes, obviously. But I do think my personal experiences do color how I feel about the films.
There's sentimentality to the remake because you watched it first when you were young.
Yeah.
So I get that. I was very, very impressed with the original when I watched it a few nights ago.
Now, we did watch it in the appropriate order. We watched the original first, and we watched the remake second. I did not know I was doing this for a first-time viewer, but here we are.
That's why I made you do the double header, and I insisted on rewatching the original first.
Yeah, because I remember saying, why don't we just do the remake and we'll talk about the original and, you know, compare and contrast it, and you were like, why don't we watch them both?
I had to very, very much push for that, and I was worried that you were going to catch on and be suspicious.
No, I just figured you wanted, like, a good, accurate, but wow, okay, so let's do the compare and contrast. Now, we've both seen both, finally, so we're caught up. I had already seen both, but, you know, here we are. So let's talk about the main characters. So the Norman and Marion Crane, they're a little bit different in both. Yeah. And I think that they're liked or disliked for a little bit different reasons. So start with Norman. How do you feel about the portrayals?
So in the original, he's very much a person that is designed to lull you into a false sense of security. He's the guy next door, good-hearted, a little bit quirky, but normal.
I mean, as normal as you can be in this situation, sure.
Normal until you find out that he's not.
Okay.
And then you have the Vince Vaughn character where it's a little bit more overtly creepy. And it kind of plays into giving a little bit of the movie away because he's very off. It's not the same. I wouldn't be in a room with him alone. Nope, I'm not going to hang out with you.
Right.
You're creepy. Please, no. Now,
do you think one over the other impacted your likability of this movie?
I think that's entirely fair. I think the original version, Anthony Perkins does such a great job at portraying that character. He's just...
So you think that you prefer the original version and it does impact...
I think it did color me watching the remake.
Now, question. If you had seen the remake as a standalone and had no idea that it was a remake, you just thought it was a movie, do you think that you would have enjoyed Vince Vaughn's character or not?
I think it would have been a much more enjoyable experience if I hadn't just seen and had so fresh in my mind
what it should have been.
The original true version.
Okay, but standalone, you didn't hate Vince Vaughn's acting, is my question.
No, it wasn't so much hated this movie. I think one of the things that I noticed is that it seemed like they were almost reading a script to just do the shot-for-shot remake because it's such an iconic movie. They know the line, so they're just getting the line out there, almost. Where it's, and then I stabbed her.
Oh, see, I didn't see that. So, I will say, for me, obviously Vince Vaughn's version is what I saw first. So that for me had a creepy nature from the way I associate it. Also, Gus Van Sant has stated that one of the tweaks he made to the film was he was intending to feed the audience information rather than hiding it because they already knew the ending.
Right.
So he was trying to kind of creep them out right from the beginning. So I think that was effective. I do think that Vince Vaughn's interpretation was different, but I think that it kind of worked in some ways to go with the original source material, which he was originally very into pornography, and that was one of the things that was introduced early on in the book in the back parlor scene where she's looking through his books and she comes across like pornography and she kind of gets an idea of like, oh, something's weird here, something's uncertain.
Yeah.
So I think that Vince Vaughn character kind of embodied that part of the original source material a little bit better. So while the original Anthony Perkins character was much better, creepy and overall antagonist for sure, I do think that some of the elements that were taken out because Hitchcock chose not to use it from the book was given to Vince Vaughn, and I don't think it didn't work. I just think you're comparing to a masterpiece. You're never going to live up to the masterpiece.
Well, this is the reason that Hollywood should stop doing sequels and then stop doing remakes of classic movies and make reimaginings of bad movies that have a great concept. You don't need to remake Psycho. You need to remake a movie that is terrible with a good concept.
Right.
And make it a good movie.
Agreed. So, anyways, all of that to say, for me, I do think that if Vince Vaughn was cast in his own horror film where he was his own standalone antagonist, I do think he could do well, which before seeing this movie, I would have never said that in my life. Like, he's only known for comedy for me, but...
Right. I mean, to me, he did a fine job. I think it's similar to Robin Williams, because he did a very creepy job in Insomnia.
Which I still haven't seen.
Which he plays a voyeuristic murderer in Alaska.
We will have to see that and compare and contrast again. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's at least warranted because it definitely draws from Psycho with the voyeurism and the creepiness of that. Also, he's a funny person that does a very unfunny...
Went dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys, I know, do not like Vince Vaughn and did not like the casting, but I think it does have some of its own merits. So I will put that there. Okay, as for Marion Crane, Anne Heche, and Janet Leigh.
Yes.
How do you feel about their portrayals?
So honestly, Janet Leigh's better.
Well,
but
the original's always better.
The original is always better. I actually really didn't care for Anne Heche's portrayal. I don't know what exactly it was, but it seemed like she was way more defensive about doing something wrong where you have no grounds to be defensive. You're stealing money.
Right.
Like, get over your damn self.
Yeah. So I will agree with you. I did not like Anne Heche's portrayal. Now, if I were to be me and make an assumption as to why that portrayal existed, I would guess that this is the time period in film where women were starting to get strong roles, but they were getting strong roles written by men, and they were coming across as, you know, the stereotypical strong woman, you know, the
hostile,
bitchy,
combative.
hostile, you know, the exaggerated version that you see on the media. That's not really what a strong woman is, but unfortunately men write it that way. And that's kind of how I felt here. Now, I don't know if that was necessarily what it was, but it felt that way very much, and that turned me off. It was.
I think it is entirely fair because it's the late 90s, and that was more the style of the time.
Yes. Now, will I say that Marion Crane's character didn't suffer from a misogynistic writer? No. There's obviously parts of that movie where you're kind of like, ugh, okay. But I enjoyed the kind of... Well, one, I enjoyed the old glamour style of her because I just thought that was, I don't know, it just brings me back to the 50s, 60s, and who doesn't love that?
I mean, all of the men speak the same way in those movies, so Sam has the same voice as every other actor in that time period, and then she has that very throaty kind of 60s speaking pattern. Like, it's...
But she plays, you know, her role in a demure but also... sure of herself type way, and there are problems with both, but the Anne Heche one just really turned me off because it was just kind of a, another strong woman written by a man, got it, understood. Like, it just screamed at me, you know?
Yeah.
So that is what it is. But anyway, so other than the main characters, another big difference that you notice right away is black and white versus color. Now, the first one is Alfred Hitchcock's last black and white, and he did have the option of making it color, but chose not to.
I think that was the right choice. I think making a black and white movie added quite a bit of sinister overtones to it. So even shooting in daylight, it's bleak and dark and gloomy compared to the shooting in daylight and you're walking around outside. It's a nice sunny day with color and you're like, oh, I'm going to go down the street and have a nice walk. Yeah. It doesn't have the same eerie feel to it.
Right. No, I agree with that. So the only part of color that I think added anything was showing the blood, which was actually added in post. It wasn't done during filming. But I did think that kind of actually seeing blood did kind of add a little bit of like, shock value, where the original used chocolate syrup. So. Right.
Well, I mean, that would have been great if they could have done that. They didn't have the technology back then, but if they could have done just the
pop of color,
flash of red, and then maybe the flash of her eye, blue, as you pan out, that would have added a little bit. But for the most part, having it black and white is just the only way to go.
Agreed. Now, just because you mentioned it, which is totally not part of the plan at all, but did you see what ophthalmologist said to Hitchcock after seeing the eye in the death scene?
I did see that in the IMDb. It was that her pupil was not dilated, which you could fix with eye drops.
Benetton, I think it is.
Yeah. So he did that for all of his other movies where he made the pupil super dilated. Yeah.
So I will say, just as I compare and contrast as we're doing it, the death scenes. So what I understood is that they actually did a freeze frame in the 1960 version of the death scene because her neck was pulsing. So they did a freeze frame. But you did actually see her breathing in that, and you saw her eye move.
A little bit, yeah.
Now, I feel like back in the day that might not have jarred you at all, but because we're so used to like what we're used to now, that did jar me just a little tiny bit, where in the death scene in the second one, they were more careful about making sure she didn't move. And there was no, I don't know if they used fake bodies and stuff nowadays. I don't know if they did that or what they did, but they did make it a little bit more clear that she wasn't moving.
Right.
So I did appreciate that at least, but obviously the death scene in the original was just more scary and jarring and scarred you a little bit more, even with the weird movement. I'll say that. Right. Okay, and then the thing that bothered you while watching it was a change of the house.
I mean, it was a similar house, but it wasn't the same house, and it didn't have nearly the same aesthetic, looming, creepy presence. It just didn't.
No.
It was just a house. Like, you need to have the original house. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, so the original house is modeled after a painting, which is actually modeled after a real house, and it's in New York and still standing today, which I want to go see. I want to just drive by it, but it's on private property, so I don't know if you can see it, but hey, road trip. But I will say that the TV show, which we will talk about a little bit later, but Bates Motel, the house is more similar to the original than to the remake.
I mean, it's an old style Victorian building, which it's got the great Gothic structure.
Yeah, it has a really good presence where the remake, it's not bad, but it's just, you have that in your mind and you're like, wait, where is this ominous house? It's
like a classic painting done by a very accomplished artist versus the Mona Lisa. Like, it's not fair.
Yeah,
you can't compare perfect to something not perfect.
Yeah, it would have been great if they had the original still standing and they could have done that, but they don't. So I did want to say real quickly, we didn't write this down to talk about, but I wanted to mention it, the difference in trailers. So the original trailer, if you guys haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, so you can check it out, is Alfred Hitchcock walking around and giving like a tour of the house and explaining how a murder happened here, and it's got kind of upbeat, almost Disney-like music.
It's that, and he's giving away things that he's not really giving away. Like, he says, this painting is important when it's what the painting is covering.
Yeah, and he also mentions that the mother is very disturbed, and that the son, you should feel bad for him because of such a domineering woman in his life, and it's just, it's really kind of interesting how different trailers were back then, and how it was very much almost a separate little like art piece on its own, where now trailers are just kind of cutting pieces together and putting on the ominous music. And
it's the best pieces of the movie. Sometimes it's the best pieces that don't even make it into the final movie.
Right.
And you're like, well, what did I know everything that I need to know about the movie. I don't even need to see it anymore.
Right. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I almost wish they would go back to those trailers, because that to me was way more interesting and way more fun. Like
it's just a better version. I mean, occasionally you get a nice surprise to a trailer that doesn't tell you all about the movie.
Right, or they fake something where they, I think one trailer we watched, there was a woman eating, I think, spiders or something, but that doesn't, cockroaches, and it doesn't actually happen in the movie.
Well, it was that trailer for Goodnight Mommy was a different movie. It's not the same movie that we watched for the podcast. So that's a better version of the current system.
Right, we don't want shot-for-shot trailers.
No.
As a preview as to what's to come.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so beyond all of that, the original Psycho had a cultural impact. I mean, if you haven't heard at least of Psycho, you must be kidding.
Can anyone tell me a more referenced or more iconic movie than Psycho? Because
I'm sure somebody is going to come out and be like, what about Citizen Kane? Okay, okay.
Yeah, but even then, it's still Psycho is Psycho. The shower scene convinced a generation of people to take baths.
Including Janet Leigh.
Including Janet Leigh. My father, for years when he was a kid, after seeing this movie, he was probably 10 or 12, would only take baths. It's just...
There was a girl who wrote in to Alfred Hitchcock, or a girl's father, and was upset because she wouldn't take baths because of a movie called Diabolic, this was heavily based on. And then after seeing this, wouldn't take showers. And he said, take her to the dry cleaners.
I would have been like, well... I'm sorry you're a terrible parent. Like, who lets their children watch this movie? Or Diabolic?
I mean, I did it in secret, so maybe that's what happened.
Like, no, that's not on me. That's on you. Like, that's not my audience. My audience is teenagers and adults.
Agreed. But, so you knew, obviously, basically all of the movie prior to seeing it then, right? Because, I mean, how could you not?
I, of course, have seen the shower scene before I'd seen this because it's played on other things and it's just inescapable.
Yeah, it's iconic. I mean, and the you knew that sound. And, I mean, so what other movie can you say you know the sound, you know the death scenes, you know the
twist ending,
you know all of it without never seeing the film.
And it still holds up. That's the crazy part of it, is I still knew everything. I knew everything that was going to happen, and it still kept me unnerved.
Yeah, of course it did. Of course it did. So there is a show that came out, Bates Motel, which now I understand kind of why you haven't seen it, because when that came out, I was like, oh, I am in, I'm down for this, and you hadn't seen it, which was kind of surprising to me. Now I get it. But
yes, I hadn't seen it for that reason. I didn't want to watch that before the original, anything before the original. So
right, and I would say that is a huge phenomenon because it was actually a very highly acclaimed TV show, and I mean, you knew about it, right?
Yes, I had heard it. I wanted to see it. We haven't found the time. Right.
Well, we will be doing that because it's amazing. But so I mean, so much has come from this. So if you guys have not, for some reason, seen the original Psycho, please make that a goal for 2020. Like, get that done because you need to. Like, I
mean, it launched the career of Jamie Lee Curtis, and we got Halloween. We got so many great movies.
We did. Okay, so we do want to talk about its comparison to typical horror films because, I mean, obviously we are more familiar with the typical horror films because we grew up now. So
right. I mean, these days it falls into two categories. I think mostly because those are easier to do. And the first is the jump scare, where you can't see something in the camera and then you suddenly see something in the camera and you're scared.
Right.
Which, it's never not going to work just because that's how humans react to assessing personal safety.
Right. I mean, I actually truthfully don't think that jump scares really do it for me as much anymore because I'm waiting for them. And the music cues you into when they're coming. So...
Right. You build it up and then it's, there's a face-eating monster.
Right. It's the movies that are
no.
like this, that creep into your mind and you start thinking about it when you're taking a shower.
It's the anticipation. It's the, well, this could happen, or what if.
Right. It's almost the more realistic, like, oh, that could happen. Like, I'm going to go to a creepy motel in the middle of nowhere and someone might murder me in the shower. That sounds actually reasonable.
That could happen, because I'm sure it has happened.
Right, especially when you're running away and you are hiding who you are and, like, burying your tracks.
There is no trail of you. You disappear.
Right, and they make it clear in the movie that is the reason he chooses to kill her, is because she's lying about who she is and where she's from, so he knows she's hiding her tracks. So...
Right.
It's very realistic to me, which makes it creepier. Like, oh, got it. Women are not safe alone.
And then, well, that's a terrible sentiment to go. But the next thing that most movies these days do is the shock value of the violence and the killing.
And also shock value of nudity, which
right.
seems to pop up a lot in horror movies, which is a little bit shocking to me, but okay. Here we are.
Well, it's another draw to get teenagers to go see the movie.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
I guess.
It's how, oh, this person was beheaded by a lawnmower somehow. And
right. I mean, we've fallen into the trap of being like, the death scene wasn't that exciting. Why wasn't it more, I don't know,
creative?
Creative.
But at the same time, then you have Chucky with the newest Chucky with the drones cutting people's heads off and falling onto a table saw from the ceiling. It's like you're trying too hard. Make more creative death scenes, but not that insane.
Yeah. Make more creative killers. Make more, like, depth to them. More,
there's
nuance.
A tremendous amount of horrible source material from human history that you can use that'll be unimaginably horrible.
Yeah. Facts. I agree with you there.
That is more believable. Like, just pull from history. Like, George R. R. Martin is famous for doing that, and he pulls all of the horrible things for his books from history.
Right. Agreed. Okay. We did want to mention that the movie that this is really heavily based on is called Diabolique. It's a French film.
I think it's Les Diaboliques.
I mean, I am French, actually. I was going to say I'm not French, but that would be ridiculous. But I can't speak French, so not going to try that. But the big scene that people will compare would be the bath scene. And we've seen both now. We've seen the scenes, not the movie. I would love to see Diabolique. So if you guys want us to review that movie, I'm down. I'm in.
I'm sold on that.
Yeah.
I will totally watch.
I'll jump on that grenade. I'm in. Okay, so, but the scenes, which one do you think is creepier and why?
I mean, Psycho is more shocking, and it's more abrupt and horrifying. Mm-hmm. I would say that probably the bathtub scene is creepier on the face of it.
Right.
Where a guy that is underwater not breathing comes out of the water with white eyes.
Yeah, and I'm guessing he, like, kills her by, like, demonic powers or something. We haven't seen the movie, so we don't know.
No, she has a heart attack from dying. Like, she just sees something terrifying and dies.
Oh, okay. Well, the part for me that, like, unnerved me was him popping out the white contact things or whatever they were. But
the prosthetic eyes that he just,
I literally gagged in my mouth when I saw it. And it's black and white, so it's not like you see anything graphic. It's just, ugh.
And then he also is wearing a full suit in a tub. Like, he's fully clothed in a tub with white eyes, not breathing.
Yeah, it's a lot. So
well done. I mean, bravo.
Yeah, definitely well done. Okay, so, we didn't talk about the twist ending. So I feel like we do need to kind of talk about the twist ending a little bit.
Spoilers, even though it's been 60 years.
Can you spoil Psycho? Is that even possible?
Well, that's my point of only defense of not having seen it. I already knew what was going to happen.
Okay. So anyway, in the twist ending, obviously you find out that Norman is dressing up as his dead mother and killing people, and in the movie, they don't really give you a great understanding of why he feels the mother would kill these women. So you're kind of left to think about that on your own as to why you think that would be the case.
So he's obsessed with his mother. He has an edible complex.
Oedipal. It made it sound like edible,
no,
and I didn't want them to be confused about cannibalism.
No. Complex. He's very attached to his mother, and after she dies, he externalizes that for her on him. So she's very jealous and controlling and obsessed with him. So any woman that catches his eye, mother is going to fix the problem.
Mother's going to just take care of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, they show him kind of like talking to her up in the house and like screaming back and forth about like she's not coming in my house and the whatever.
I know what you want to do.
Yeah.
Not in my house, not while I'm around.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess mothers like that exist because we did read that a lot of people on the set had strained relationships with their mother, including Hitchcock.
Yeah, Hitchcock, Anthony Perkins both had controlling mothers. Anthony Perkins' father died just like Norman Bates' father at 5 and was raised by his mother from then on. Alfred Hitchcock's mother required that he stand at the foot of the bed and tell her everything that happened to him for the day.
It's sad to me to think that there is a generation of mothers that were that way. Like, I'm sure that it still exists now. I don't know.
Helicopter moms are a thing.
Yeah,
Nope.
No. It just... Okay. But anyway, so, I mean, that is one of the few movies I can think of that make that motherly Oedipal complex such a big part of it.
And I can only imagine...
Although Mommy Dearest must be one of them. I have not seen it, but...
I just can only imagine the shock value of seeing that as the ending without knowing ahead of time. We all know that it was the ending before we see the movie, but going to see that for the first time and not having the twist ending revealed had to have been a fantastic experience. That's up there with No, I Am Your Father in Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
I mean...
It's just one of those...
Those are the moments that I wish that I could have just... on their own. It's almost like I wish I could hypnotize myself to not remember anything about Star Wars or Psycho or any of those classic movies with a twist, or I See Dead People. Like, just to watch them again for the first time and go, oh my god.
Right, just to be shocked, just to be, yeah, this had to be one of those movies. Okay, anyway, moving forward, I did want to mention that this movie kind of broke a lot of kind of codes of the day and kind of moved cinema forward.
Yeah.
So a few of them were unmarried couples being in the same bed together. Would have been a hugely taboo thing back then and was. So that's probably something he just chose to do as a shock value, I would guess. But
he did. He also wanted to do that with more nudity there.
Yeah, he wanted to have bare breasts, didn't
he? He did. But the rating agencies made him cut that out. He actually included a lot of other scenes that didn't make it into the movie. Specifically, so the raters would focus on those, and the censors would focus on those scenes being cut, and he could keep the other ones, the shower scene, the toilet.
Yeah, this was actually the first fictional film in America that had a flushing toilet on screen.
Yep.
So, crazy. Another thing that he did was gender bending. So, this is... kind of confusing because they do mention that the mother is a transvestite in the end of the movie, but they say not exactly, and they don't really go into. So people in their reviews talk about how it's a transvestite killing people, but it is not, and I wanted to be clear about that. It is not. It is a man who is dealing with, I guess, multiple identities, and when he's a man, he's a man, and when he's a woman, he's a woman, and he's
not cross-dressing as a man dressing as a woman. He's cross-dressing as a fractured personality that is a woman dressing as a woman,
right? Which
is different than a transvestite,
right? Well, isn't a transvestite also not a man dressing as a woman?
Well, it is. That's what Eddie Izzard
is a
transvestite, and he does a whole 5-minute sketch about how he's an executive as transvestite. Where J. Edgar Hoover, they found a bunch of women's shoes and they thought he was a transvestite. If so, he's a weirdo. Like. I think he would also associate that if we are to determine that Norman Bates is a transvestite, which I don't think he is, weirdo. A damn
yes, there can be weirdos in any facet of life. I mean,
right.
So it doesn't... But there were some negativity about that, especially back then, and I just wanted to be clear that it is...
So this is more related to my history minute of the real-life basis for this. It's a person that is trying to become... a specific person or has a psychological issue, not someone that is dressing as the alternate gender.
Right. Anyway, the other thing that I did want to mention is that Alfred Hitchcock basically moved theaters to where they are today, where we have designated seating times, and I thought that was so cool. I didn't know that's where they came from. So basically, he had signs out front that basically said you would not be admitted if you showed up late, because he didn't want people to ruin the experience. He didn't want them to miss parts of it. And I guess back then they used to have like a full, like always running films, and you just came in and out as you pleased. And now, obviously, that is not the case. But I thought it was a really cool like thing. Like, who knew that's where that started?
Well, I mean, I can't even imagine watching it and seeing the shower scene before anything, or seeing the reveal at the end before watching the start of the movie. Like, that would have been awful.
Yeah, or like walk in right as the like investigation starts, so you miss all like the good parts.
Yeah.
Like, that just sounds awful. Okay, so we're getting down to the end. I did want to mention Gus Van Sant. So he is the director of the remake. We talk a lot about Hitchcock in this, so I figured we should at least mention him. As much as you may dislike this film, he was very famous for a film that's very near and dear to us that we still haven't done on the podcast. What is wrong with us? Are we from Boston? Like,
I don't even know if we can say that anymore if we haven't done this movie. You're right.
Yeah, I feel like we may have to give up our card. But anyway... it was Good Will Hunting. Obviously, we've both seen it, and if he like drops a bomb on me, if we ever do the podcast that he hasn't seen it, he can give up his card. But anyway, so he was very well known for that, and he did give a reason why he chose to do a shot for shot. Do you want to tell that reason?
He is quoted as saying, "I did a shot for shot of Psycho, so no one else would have to." So it's basically, I did it so that I saved the rest of the directing community from trying to remake a perfect movie. Like, you can't... There are certain movies that you can't do a shot-for-shot remake. You can't
do a remake.
You can't do a remake full stop. Yeah. Right. Like, there are certain movies that are just untouchable. Right. And this is one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet it has a shot-for-shot remake. That's the craziest part of it. Like, it's... I can't begin to describe how much that irritates me. Right.
So anyway, I just kind of wanted to mention him because you may know him as the person who horribly remade Psycho, because that seems to be the case. But he's actually an acclaimed director, and
so he did Good Will Hunting, and he was getting nothing but questions about Good Will Hunting, so he did this to get people to shut up, basically.
Basically is what happened. So anyway, we are going to be talking about Shot for Shot because you guys flooded us with it, but let's do a history minute before we hit Audience X.
All right, so I have a few.
Tyler's History Minute.
So, history of this movie, because it's now 60 years old. Mm-hmm. They used Bosco's chocolate syrup for the blood, because it shows up better on camera in black and white. Mm-hmm. And then, moving on, there are a couple controversies related to this movie, the original.
I love controversy.
So, the first being that after it had been released in theaters, and it was about to be released on TV, mm-hmm. There was a murder where a woman was brutally stabbed and beaten in her home, and they actually pushed the TV release for that. Her name was Valerie Percy. Okay. A very well-known established family from Chicago, I believe. Her father went on to become a senator or congressman, mm-hmm. and it still to this day remains unsolved. She was murdered in 1966, I believe. They do have a likely suspect. His name was Fred.
It's still not solved?
It's still not solved.
That's crazy.
So they don't have a definitive answer. They think that it was likely this person, but they can't prove it. His name was Fred Malcho. He actually died in one of the most Hollywood ways to die that I can think. So he fell off a railroad trestle bridge being chased by police.
Oh my God.
In 1967. Well, that's just straight out of a movie. Like, jumping off a bridge or falling off a bridge is straight out of a movie.
It is.
And then the second murder that is related to this movie is Marlee Renfro, who is Janet Leigh's body double for the shower scene. She was a stand-in and mm-hmm. did all that. She was murdered by her neighbor, Kenneth Dean Hunt, quite a while after this, in, I believe, 1988, when she was in her 70s.
71.
Yes. So she was violently murdered and raped and all of that horrible things, and she was in this movie, which is kind of a weird carryover.
And the murderer wasn't discovered until a few days before the opening of the remake.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, you were being very slow about it, so, we're at 54 minutes. Let's go.
All right. And then lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about Ed Gein.
Okay.
Because he is the real-life inspiration for this movie. So Ed Gein is a very well-known American serial killer and...
Only killed 2 people, so not technically a serial
grave
killer.
robber extraordinaire that was very, very creepy and deranged. So he wanted to become his mother. It's very similar. Mm-hmm. So he would go rob graves of women that had recently died that reminded him of his mother, steal their body parts, and make things from them.
He'd wear their skin, right?
He would wear face masks that were their actual faces. He made a corset out of a human torso.
Lovely.
He had a nipple belt, a lampshade that was made out of a person's face. Yeah.
Lovely. Now, he is an inspiration for other movies, too, right?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, among others. So, yeah, he's incredibly important to the horror community in that he was a horrible person and did terrifying things. Yeah.
But again, only murdered 2 people.
Yes, he did. Convicted of only murdering 2 people. There very likely could be more. In fact, they have several that they don't know definitively, but they believe that Ed Gein is responsible for, which is why they label him a serial killer, because they believe there are more than 2 people. When asked if he would have sex with the dead bodies, his justification was, no, that's a horrible thing. No, they just smell too bad.
Oh, okay. So it's not awful. Like, necrophilia isn't repulsive. It's the whole smell. Got it.
Yeah. Ed Gein's car was actually sold at auction and turned into a sideshow attraction where they would charge 25 cents to see and take pictures in the car.
Oh.
The house, and thank God someone did this, was up for auction as well. And people were worried that it was going to become a tourist attraction.
So they leveled it?
No, it mysteriously burned to the ground a few days before auction.
Oh, weird.
Such a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, they suspect arson, but I have a suspicion that they didn't really investigate.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, that's
Dang shame.
awful.
Yeah.
No, don't tell me that. And Ed Gein, when he heard about his house burning to the ground, said, well, it's probably for the best.
It probably is.
So, yeah. That's what I got for the History Minute. Not entirely uplifting, but...
Not entirely uplifting, but
it's
interesting.
It's not an uplifting movie.
No, not meant to be. Okay, so audience asks.
Audience asks.
Obviously, the first person we're going to go to is Krista, because she is the only person that sent us an email. Guys, if you send us emails, we will spend more time on your questions, because we love emails. Okay, so, she started by saying that she's not really a fan of the remake. She's a bigger fan of the original because she doesn't like Vince Vaughn. And part of it is due to the masturbation scene. So her first question is, what do you think of that particular scene? Do you think it was needed, even as a way to show it's updated for a newer generation?
I honestly don't have a problem with that scene on its face, so much as I have a problem with that's an awful, gross cleanup afterwards. Like,
lovely, great. I wish to hear that.
But no, it's not a. Ed Gein was a horrible man, and that's of course what he would have done. Like, that fits with the style of the movie and the subject matter.
Yeah, and I think that the pornography is something that we talked about earlier that comes from the original book that this is based on. It kind of does lean in that direction where it's obviously a sexually based motivation.
Right.
And if you see the show, too, where they kind of expound upon it, it's all very sexual based as well. So I think it fits in, and I think it's something that was more able to be done now, where I don't think Hitchcock necessarily wouldn't have done it. It's just he wouldn't have been able to back then.
He very well could have done something similar to that and had it been removed by the censors. Like, there's just...
Right. We don't know, but I definitely don't think it's out of the realm of something Hitchcock would have done if he would have been able to do so.
No, I don't think it's a problem. I just think it was a really creepy scene because it's, of course, supposed to be.
Right, exactly. I mean, it should be. Okay, so she says, what do you think of the remake style of close-up camera shots on Norman versus Hitchcock's style of holding the wide shots to include background objects to make Norman seem less of a threat?
I mean, I honestly would prefer the way that they did in the original because it is the original. It's just a better version.
Right.
I don't have a problem with the close-ups. I mean, it does kind of muddy the waters with the close-up of the eye in the death scene where all of the other shots are very much in the original a wider view, and then you have that one stark close-up in the shower scene, and then you pull everything back. It just it has a more impactful moment in the movie than the original and then the remake where it's more in line with all of the other shots.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, I'm not somebody who really focuses on camera work, so I will say that it didn't jar me either way, really. But I can see now that we're talking about it why it would have a different impact. But truthfully, I don't notice that much when I watch film. So I guess I'm a terrible film viewer in that way. She did say, I do have to mention as fabulous as Janet Leigh was in the original, I relate more to Laisha's performance in the remake. I see her portrayal as more working woman who got trapped. I totally get that, and she doesn't seem super remorseful to have robbed the bank.
I mean, she didn't rob a bank, she robbed a person. Like that person.
She robbed a person, yes, that's true. So I kind of look at this as like I am the rule follower to the T, and I wonder if that partly does kind of bother me too, that doesn't seem to faze her, because I understand that type of man is probably perfectly okay to be robbed, but as a person, I wouldn't.
I mean, if you're going to rob someone, rob a bank because they're insured.
Right.
Don't rob a person.
He did say it was money that he
could afford to lose. I mean, fine. So if you're going to rob someone, rob him, not the little old lady that is her life savings. Right. Fine, but...
Yeah. But, I mean, I can understand the working woman thing. I just thought her portrayal was a little bit not relatable, I guess, for me.
Yeah, it's the original performance is better. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It just is.
And then her last thing was, if the remake had ended up as a hit, do you think it would have led to more shot-for-shot remakes? And if so, what would you like to see remade shot-for-shot, Disney notwithstanding?
I mean, I would have imagined they would have, if it was a success, they would have had to have done classic other movies, shot-for-shot remake. But there was no chance of that. You're setting yourself up for failure.
He literally purposely set himself up for failure. He knew that was what was going to happen. Right. So I don't think it could have been a success, but if I were to see one, I guess Citizen Kane would be the first thing you would think of, because I mean it had the opening scene that's never rivaled. Right.
Citizen Kane's a great answer. I mean, 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, that'd be kind of... now, isn't there supposed to be a remake? Didn't we talk about that?
I think there is, but I would like to see a remake. You'd have to change the title because it can't be 12 Angry Men, because you can't have just a jury of men these days. But, I don't know, there's a lot of great movies that should be left alone that Hollywood shamelessly would have exploited if this had been a success financially. Right. Like, they would have done all of them. They'd have gone back and done...
Of course they would.
All the original Draculas, which they have. And they've all been terrible. Just, they're relentless in their pursuit of money.
Right. Okay, so we've said shot for shot about 10,000 times.
Yeah.
So let's get into their discussion here. So, Zenless Popcorn says, Psycho is one of the greatest movies of all time, standing tall 60 years after release. Why remake something like that when it can never be topped? Why remake so many good movies and taint something beautiful?
I agree. You don't need to remake this movie. You don't have to remake any classic movie. You need to pick those movies that have the great idea that are terrible. Right. Like, if only they had fixed this, or only they had done this, or changed this, it would have been a better movie. Right. That's what you need to go back and do.
Right. Agreed with that. So I wanted to say a few things about the shot for shot. So people did have their commentary. John Levant said sometimes it's done because there are no original ideas. Sometimes it's done for a cash grab. And then the person did respond saying, you smashed a nail on the head. The biggest problem seems to be it was all about money. And sure, it's a money-making industry, but why ruin a franchise with reimaginings? So first I want to say, He did the shot-for-shot remake from his own words so that a remake wasn't made that was a success. That was a actual, like, movie where there was trying to change something that was perfect.
Right.
He basically wanted this to fail so that everyone watches the original. Okay, so I want to say that. Second of all, I want to say that there was no possible way that this could have been done in a way that anyone would have been happy.
Oh no, it's a classic example of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you make the exact replica shot for shot, they're going to compare it to the original, and the original's better. If you do a reimagining, why didn't you do a shot for shot? Like
right.
there's no happiness in either case. There's no way to make everyone happy.
Right. And now Ryan Terry on this topic, and we love him, and he's so great with horror films. One of the things he said was that basically this was redundant. And I agree, but I also feel like in this situation, if they had changed too much, there would have been a complaint that there was changed too much. I mean, if you notice, one of the complaints that we got in our audience asked was the one big change that happened in this film, which was the masturbation scene, which was the biggest change, I would say, was the most noticeable change. Right. And it was already commented on. So, and we get very few questions. So that says something to me of, you're going to complain about the shot for shot, but you're also going to complain about the changes because the original is perfect. So there is no good thing. Also, there is a TV show that did take liberties and did change things. Not everything, but changed things. And if you look at the critiques, people complain that it's not original to the source material. Which way do you want it? There is no good way. So only thing you can do is leave it alone. But I think Gus Van Sant knew that would not happen.
Right. There's no way to cut a baby to make everyone happy.
Ooh.
Well,
thank you for that.
It's a biblical reference.
Yeah, well, that all I thought it was those baby cakes where, you see people cutting into them and it's a cake, but it's horrifying. No. So
I mean, it's just he did this to suffer so no one else had to. Like Gus Van Sant died for your sins.
Right. So let's honor the hero that he is.
Right. He stood tall when it mattered and said, "You know what? We will do this one and only one. And never again.
There can only be one.
We are going to destroy a classic movie and it will never happen again. You're welcome, the world."
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we've gotten that out of our system, right? Yeah. Okay. So Stork says, Norman Bates is the original slasher. Is he the scariest because he's also the most realistic? Which we did kind of touch on.
I think that hugely plays a part in that. Like, there's a reason that you're more scared of Norman Bates or Hannibal Lecter or anyone that could be real than you are of the 8-foot-tall CGI face-ripping monster.
Right. I mean, that's why Hannibal was so terrifying. That's realistic. Like, that's okay. Like, that can happen.
There's also a reason we have fascination with serial killers. People that actually have done this. The real life Ed Gein, Ted Bundy. All of them are more terrifying than any monster.
Because they're real.
Right.
Yeah.
They are a monster. It's not that you don't have to come up with something.
Right. Or Chris Watts is it's the current day
right.
terrifying monster man. Okay. And then lastly, this isn't really a question, but I feel like it can lead to a conversation. Contrarian said, I mean, they both have the same weak-ass epilogue, so do you want to talk about that ending scene? Because I do think people are a little bit...
Are you talking about the psychiatrist at the end and the whole going over the thing that we already know?
Yes.
In a very contrived, kind of painful to listen to. Well, you see here, children.
Yes.
This is what happened.
Yeah. So before we explain, well, I don't know if you're going to explain how I feel, but I will say Hitchcock did not want this in the film. He was pressured by the studios to include that in case the audience members did not understand what was going on or needed a little bit of extra explanation, exposition, all of that kind of stuff. So this was not Hitchcock's idea. This was the studio pushing for that.
I think he was right. I mean, it's an unnecessary scene where it just drags out the twist at the end where it belabors the point. Sure, keep the scene where he's in the room with his mother sitting there.
That is creepy, and there are redoings of that for other things, especially in the TV show, but there are other things too where you see her sitting alone in the room with the fly.
Yeah.
That part I think is good. Just cut out the psychiatrist part.
Well, right. Keep the monologue where she's talking to herself and he's smiling. That's
creepy.
Fantastic. But the whole sitting in a room, well, you see here, this is what happened, kind of kills everything.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, I will say it's definitely mansplaining. It's literally man explaining what we already know.
To me, it feels a little bit like leaving no one behind and pulling everyone along so that they can understand. When some people, if you don't get that or you don't understand it, you're not the brightest bulb.
You weren't meant to understand it. You're not the audience intended here.
Go back to your coloring book, for the love of... Like, you don't have the attention span or intellect to understand a basic thing.
Right. It took away from the film to me.
I think it is very clear that it's not meant to do anything other than pander to the lowest common denominator to make sure that, oh, he was wearing a wig because he's his mother.
Yeah. So thank you so much for mansplaining a movie to us. That's just, Okay. So anyway, that was all of the audience ask that we had. Most of people just discussed the shot for shot because that seems to be the issue. But anyway, did you want to give reviews? I guess we can do separate reviews for each one.
Reviews.
I think that's fair. So Rotten Tomatoes has the original 1960 version at a 96 and then a 95 for the audience score. Unsurprising.
Is there hundreds in Rotten Tomatoes? Because this should be...
I honestly don't know because the original is...
I'm going to, at some point, go to Rotten Tomatoes and filter to 100 and then make us watch a film just for that to know what it is.
With more than one rating.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 9-7. Like, it's great. How do you argue with... The only reason it doesn't get a 10 is because you know the ending. You can't even really fault the movie for that because it's just so iconic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic all the way around.
Yeah, it's absolutely... I mean, I'd give the original a 10. I don't have... there's misogyny laced in there and there's, things I guess we could look back on and pick apart, but it's a perfect masterpiece for its time and I'm not going to sit here and do that. Like, I'm just not, so...
No, you don't pick apart the Mona Lisa. You don't pick apart the Statue of David. You don't...
Right.
No.
If it was made today and that was how it was made, sure, it would probably get like a 8.5 because there are definitely some undertones there that I would like to see removed if it was today, but it wasn't. So here we are. It's a 10. Thank you.
So the remake, 1998 version, has it 38.
Woo!
And then an audience score of 28.
Wow, you guys are harsh.
I mean, not really. It's not a particularly good movie. My main problem with it is I'd watched the original right before, and it just loses so much because you can't compare those two movies.
No,
It's not fair.
No.
So I'll give it a 4.
Wow.
It's not good. It's by comparison, it would have been a 6 or 7 on its own if we didn't have the original.
Yeah.
But you can't rework perfection.
You can't. Okay. I was going to give it a 6.5. So, I mean, you have to remember that I did see the remake first. So I saw it as a standalone movie. So that does kind of color how you see this movie. And I didn't see the original for a while after. So, I mean, that movie stuck with me for a while. Right. And on its own, it is a good movie. I mean, there are parts, obviously, that aren't great, but on its own, without comparison, it is a good movie. It's
one of those, it's a great concept that was done perfectly, but if you are looking at the one that is not done perfectly, you're like, okay, it's a great concept, but nah.
Right. It has its holes, it has its flaws, but on its own, alone, it is a good movie if you knew nothing else. But, I mean, knowing what I know, obviously you have to remove a lot of points for that. Right. But it is what it is. So, I mean, roast me if you want, but that's what I saw first, so that's where I am. So, there we go. Okay, next movie. No one has seen this, I promise you, but guys, if you can try to pretend like you have, so we have some kind of audience ask, I love it.
I'm actually very excited for this movie because it's got kind of a dystopian horror thriller vibe.
And boring finances for the boring finance
It's
man.
got basic economic theory in this movie. It's got a very interesting look into human action and.
Yeah, and for those of you who say you want original concepts and not remakes, this appears to be an original concept. We have not seen it yet, so we might complain about it, but...
So the movie is The Platform, and
it's a 2019 film,
2019, and I am super excited to watch this because it looks so just different than anything that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. So I will say, if you guys are listening to this right now, this podcast did come out late. We are going to try to get the next podcast up at normal time, so that means only in a few days from now. That is our attempt. We'll see what happens. Anyways, if you want to talk to us outside the podcast, I am on Twitter, and so is Tyler. I am Blame Tyler. I am at Cinematically C, and Tyler is Blame Tyler CC. If you want to talk to him, you need to tag me because he's never on Twitter.
I'm never on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter every day, so just make sure that you tag me so I can let him know. Other than that, email us because we will literally go through your entire email like we did for Krista because it makes me very happy when people email us. So cinematicallycorrect@gmail.com. And if you have seen this movie, please send us audience ask. I don't expect a lot of you have. I haven't seen much about this movie. So, but if you have any kind of commentary that you want to ask about just trickle down economics and put into a horror film and you have some kind of questions about how that works or anything, then
just a stark difference in classism and socioeconomic repercussions for different actions.
Yeah, I mean, so we can even talk about broad things. So just do that. And other than that, you can find us on pretty much any platform you want, but Twitter's going to be your best bet. But yeah, thank you to Jake at Athos Music for our intro and outro music, and we'll be back next week with The Platform.
Thank you all for listening.